If you work for the Catholic Church and want to transform the culture of your parish and put more souls in the pews, we're here to help. I'm Ty Hua, here with my co-host John Konz, and this is the Catholic Ministry Professionals Podcast, your favorite leadership development podcast for Catholic churches. Each week, you can expect engaging discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. Today, we're discussing pathways of discipleship, setting the groundwork, how to lay the foundation for a thriving parish of intentional disciples. John, how are you?
It is a good day today. It's a good day to be inside. It's windy.
Yeah, happy Holy Week.
Is it windy up there?
Yes,
Happy
very
Holy
windy.
Week. The wind is moving. The Spirit is moving. It's a good time. You know, I think this is going to be a really good episode for people. In a lot of parishes, the idea of discipleship, it's like, yes, we want to make disciples. We know that's the mission. But it can feel like, because we're so focused on running the programs, getting through to Mass and stuff, it can feel like discipleship is really something that's meant to happen by chance. You know, that it happens almost on accident when people come in, rather than happening on design, right? People are invited to church, you know, maybe they attend Mass, they participate in a couple programs, but they don't feel like they're equipped, or they're like there's no intentional effort to deepen their relationship with Jesus. And the problem is that without clear pathways of discipleship, it's hard for people to move beyond just being attendees to becoming disciples who are actively following Christ and sharing his love with others in the community, in the parish. But if our listeners follow through, we've got 4 episodes on pathways of discipleship. If you follow along with us, we're going to look at how we can create intentional pathways for discipleship, and we're going to help parishioners grow in their faith, deepen their relationship with Christ. This episode is going to set the groundwork for understanding how to create these pathways by empowering staff and parishioners to engage in just like a vibrant, ongoing journey of discipleship. Does that sound like a good plan for today?
I don't know of a better one.
One of the most important things we can do. One could argue. So we want to look at our key scripture verse for today, which is from Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 through 20. This is the mission of the church. I worked at a parish where they had spent like 2 years meeting with people and trying to define their mission statement. And I just wanted to beat my head against the wall, because they'd spent hours, hundreds of hours over the last couple of years trying to boil down what is the mission? What is the thing we're trying to do here? When Jesus gave this to us in Scripture, it is for us to make disciples. Jesus says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe." This is the mission of the church. This scripture passage, Matthew 28, verses 19 through 20, it reminds us that discipleship, it's not optional for Christians. This is the thing. And we're all called to do this in our lives, right? As parents, we do this for our kids, but in a particular and in a special way, when we work for the church, we are called to do more than just our own personal evangelizing. We are called to become agents, engines of discipleship in our community. So Jesus commands us to make disciples, to teach them his ways, to guide them in growth in faith. And as leaders within the church, it is our responsibility to create clear pathways for people to step into the fullness of our faith through discipleship. And so I want to talk today about 3 specific things, 3 concrete things to consider when we, as church professionals, as Catholic ministry professionals, are looking to create pathways of discipleship within our church, so that people don't accidentally become disciples one day, but that they are intentionally led into deeper discipleship. So the first one of those is to understand some of the frameworks that are out there. Ty, do you like frameworks?
Love them.
Yeah, what do you love about frameworks? What do they do for you?
Keeps you accountable, right? Like you're not just going out and making stuff up on the fly. It's like, not every path for discipleship is going to be the same, but you can rely on certain things. And if you do those certain things, it'll help keep you on that path. It'll help keep you in going at least in the right direction with somebody, versus just saying, man, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. And pretty soon you're wandering a forest in a circle. So that's what I love about frameworks. It makes it easy once you know exactly that direction that you're going to just go versus sitting there and deciding, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? What do I say? It just makes things very clear.
Yeah, it gives you that the guardrails so you don't fall completely off the path, but also laying the path before you so you have something that you can actually choose to move forward on. So we want to just understand some of the frameworks that are out there. If we want to create these pathways, we can understand that we don't have to create everything from scratch, right? The pattern is there, the method is there, and there's options, and there's not just one. There are many. But to pick something and to stick with it, I think, is the trick. So let's just look at three there are three of the most popular, or the ones that I hear talked about the most. And one of those is Sherry Weddell's Thresholds of Conversion. These really outline kind of the pathway of discipleship, the moves that a person's heart has to go through, the thresholds that they need to move over to go into the next one. And the reason we want to understand these is because when we engage with someone, if we think they've never heard of Jesus Christ, it means something different. If we think that they're interested, come in and it's clear that they're interested in becoming a disciple, they're interested in RCIA, they're at a different spot than someone who is anti-Catholic, right? And we need to be able to just engage with people and be able to understand where they are in these 5 steps, these 5 thresholds. And so just go ahead and Google Sherry Weddell's Thresholds of Conversion, and you can get a big, long list of those. You can buy her book, Forming Intentional Disciples, which really lays all of that out very well, better than we're going to be able to do in our short podcast. But she's got a really popular one that's really useful. And because it's been around for a little while, there's lots of resources that are available to help you assess where people are at, to understand based on their conversation, the words that they say, that you can kind of get a sense for how open they are to receiving the message you have, whether they trust the message of the church, or whether they're just resolutely against it, whether they've never considered it, whether they're just agnostic on the whole thing. So Sherry Weddell's Thresholds of Conversion, I mean, it's a model that does identify those stages that a person goes through on their journey from maybe disbelief into belief and a decision to follow Christ. Another really popular model, or really another popular framework, is Focus's Win, Build, Send model. It kind of takes all this and it just simplifies it. What I like about Win, Build, Send is that it's very simple. It's easy then to look at this and really assess whether someone's in these stages. So win, right? This identifies someone who needs to be won over for Christ. This is all your pre-evangelization stuff. These might be people who are anti-Catholic. It might just be people who don't care, right? They're only at RCIA or they're only at First Communion because really grandma and grandpa are the ones who are making them show up. That's why they're here at the confirmation classes, because they don't want grandma and grandpa to be disappointed in them. And so you can understand whether their hearts are won over or not. Once they're won over, then there's the process. This is the whole catechetical journey. What it should be is building them up, giving them all the tools that they need to live the Christian life, to live the Catholic life from their heart, to really, this is how we, again, build them up so that they can be sent. And that's the third area of that framework, is sending. Because disciples aren't meant to just get Jesus and hold on to him. They're meant to go and enter into that mission that we talked about above for Matthew 28, which is for them to go and make disciples. So there's an element, and this is a missing part in many of our parishes, where we actually send them. So many times we just boil this sending down to, well, we have confirmation kids, let's make them do service hours, and that's us sending them out into the community. And that, while that's not a bad thing, it falls glaringly short of sending them to make disciples. So again, there has to be an element of sending people. And in that spirit, I do want to transition to another model that is definitely worth looking into, which is Divine Renovation. And they have their Alpha course that they offer, which really emphasizes and creates a space for community building and evangelization. So it kind of puts all that stuff together so that there's a program you can walk people through that they can opt into, and I think that's important, that they're not being forced into this, but that it's a program that's available for people, and it's meant to evangelize them and move them through the process of catechesis and into a place where they're ready to be sent and become disciple makers. And it is itself a very clear pathway. So all of this to say, that when you understand the frameworks that are out there, when you kind of take some time to research them, look into them, you realize that you don't have to create everything from scratch. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And in fact, you can take these frameworks and you can assess your parishes in light of these to see, okay, maybe we have a lot of stuff that wins people over, or maybe we don't. Maybe all we have is stuff that builds people up. But if they're not won over before they get into these, then we're not really building them up, and we're not going to be able to send them. So you can identify where there are elements missing from these frameworks within the context of your parish. And again, I just think it's a huge gift that we have these, because we don't have to be the most creative person in the world to be able to apply them, to be able to assess our parishes in light of them, and to be able to make great change and make small changes that are going to transform lives for Jesus Christ.
One thing, John, another thing I should say that kind of popped in my head as you were talking, like, why do I like frameworks? Yes, it gives us that direction, but it's a process that we can scale, right? So I'm doing this thing, I'm bringing on a disciple, but when they're discipled, right? Like, hey, you know just as much, if not more than I do, because you've put in the work. Now it's your turn to run the same process. Here's what I did to work with you. Now it's your turn to go out and do the same thing with this framework. So that's what I like about frameworks, scalability.
Yeah, the scalability and the application. And what I also love is it gives you a tool to be able to share and even approach other key people in your parish, ministry leaders, volunteers, and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why it's been effective. This is the fruit that's come out of it. And I'd love to have a discussion with you about your ministry and how this might help you to bear more fruit. It gives you some real tangible things for leveraging that conversation forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes me to step number 2. This is the second thing we want to talk about, which is the need to look at our parish with fresh eyes. So, there's frameworks out there. They're available. The next step is really an assessment of your parish. How well do your current programs and ministries align with the discipleship model that you've reviewed? Are there those gaps like we talked about before? The nice thing, like you said, it's scalable, Ty. So you might not be in charge of the whole parish, but you can take that model and apply it to your ministry. So you can create moments for that entire pathway in the context of your ministry. If you happen to have the decision-making rights, if you happen to have the authority to make changes on a grander scale, you can set that up as the framework for the whole parish. But again, it scales down and it scales up. With that in mind, then you can assess your ministry and see where the gaps are. And the trick here, though, is to get some fresh eyes on it. And I mean that for yourself, to really look at the whole process. If you're the DRE, you need to go into the classrooms and actually sit in some of the classrooms and see, like, wow, are they winning over hearts to Jesus? Are they building up these kids in a real and substantial way? Do their conversations lead the students towards becoming disciple makers themselves, going out? And you can assess up and down that whole scale. But the trick, again, is with fresh eyes. And I mean everything from the moment people show up and they're walking in the doors. Are they just expected to walk mindlessly into the rooms, or are there volunteers there that greet them with joy? All of these elements come into play when you're looking at intentionally building pathways of discipleship and an experience that helps them to encounter the love of God, which is the foundation for discipleship. So look at all of your parish through the lens of these discipleship frameworks and try to look for those moments. What are those little touch points that can become high leverage moments for encounter, so that people can develop a deeper commitment to Christ? They can develop a deeper awareness of his presence and respond more intensely. And so I would encourage you to, as you look at these frameworks, whichever one speaks to you the most, whichever one you feel maybe God is kind of inspiring you to, whichever one gives you that fire, to really then learn about it, become a student of it, buy a book on it, and then really consider how each element of your purview, your programming, your volunteers, your trainings, your meetings, how all of it fits into that framework. And you can then begin to really practically kind of map out the journey of one individual through that. And that's the thing, is not to look at it as hundreds of people coming through this, but what does one person experience when they come here, and what chances does that one person have of becoming an intentional discipleship of Jesus who is ready to be sent out into the world by the time they're through the whole.
Right.
Number 3, to look at the relationships you're building. And this is something that I think we all know is super important, but often gets relegated to the back, or it's done in a very superficial way just because we know it's important, but we don't have time for it. We're so busy running after things. But we know that discipleship, it's not about programs. It's about relationships. Discipleship only happens in relationships. So it's really important to look at the relationships you build in your ministry and assess them in light of the frameworks you've studied as well. The relationships you as a director of faith formation form with your teachers are important. Now, you won't be able to disciple. If you're in a larger parish, you won't be able to individually disciple the hundreds of kids that are involved in your programs. But you should be intentionally discipling, guiding, training, leading your leaders, your volunteers in an intentional way. And so to even look at your training, to look at your touch points for your volunteers, your staff, your trainees, those touch points, do they walk them through the framework? Are they designed to help them, to allow you to mentor those leaders in faith and along the way? Are you mentoring them, or are they just simply showing up? Are they just clocking in and clocking out because they know it's important? Relationships are the heart of discipleship, and so it's important to ask that question. How can we create a culture where discipleship is the foundation of who we are, where discipleship is the way we live? And you can use these frameworks. Again, it scales up and scales down. I like that you said that, Ty. You can use these frameworks to assess even those relationships that you cultivate, those leaders that you call into ministry, and to identify areas where more intentional investment is needed. So really take that time to find a framework that works, that makes sense for you and in your ministry, and challenges you to form and develop real intentional relationships in your own ministry. And with that, I think we can move on to the devil's advocate.
John, with every devil's advocate, it all sounds good, but it seems like a lot of work. Creating intentional pathways of discipleship sounds like a huge time and resource commitment. How can we possibly sustain this long-term initiative, if you will, with limited staff and resources?
That's a valid concern, because I know, especially in our area, there's a lot of rural parishes. They don't have huge staffs. But I also want to say that it's not undoable. Like you said, Ty, these frameworks give you a pathway. They give you a method. They allow you to scale it up and scale it down. And so I would say scale it down. Start small. You don't have to recreate everything. You don't have to do it all at once, but you can begin with 1 or 2 things and begin to think about them as a pathway of discipleship, as a journey, not just a program, not just resources that we need to get through. And you can begin to start thinking about this pathway and how it develops through the relationships, gradually expand it as you see success, as your capacity to think with these pathways, to guide people through them as that grows. So, and also you keep in mind that discipleship's not a one-size-fits-all model. You can tailor the pathways to what will work best in your parish's unique context. So the success in terms of the resources, use what you already have. The leaders you have, the existing programs you have, the volunteers you already have, the community that you've been given to steward and to cultivate. You have to really think intentionally about it and start small and give yourself space to make some mistakes and to grow through them. But you have to start with kind of a clear vision of the framework that you want, the clear vision of the path you're trying to lead people down, and then you can build it from there. And with that, I think we, of course, never want to leave you without something that you can do today to take action on our conversation. And so I want to encourage you to just do those 3 steps above. Look up some of these frameworks that we talked about. The Sherry Waddell's thresholds of conversion, Focus's win, build, send model. Google other models for discipleship, and just find something like the wording makes sense to you, something that allows you to get real concrete moments that you can start to focus on moving people through. And then, choose a couple to study and decide which one works best for your parish, your context, your community. The second one then is like we said, assess your parish. Take some time to really look at the programs you have with fresh eyes, and not just the programs, not just the resources, but the moments that people have as they come through. Are they encountering the front office person when they come in? Are they encountering the pastor? Who should be out there? Who shouldn't be out there? What are the teachers doing when people come in? Really take a moment to look at that and see those as opportunities to build in concrete moments for these pathways. And then finally, to think about your own relationships that you're developing, your own discipleship relationships, and see if there's ways that you need to change them to be more intentional. And I think there's always ways we can be more intentional with the conversations that we have, with how we're investing in the spiritual growth of our leaders, and how intent we are, and how obvious we make that desire in our hearts to others, that we desire for them to grow closer to Jesus, that this isn't just about the people they're serving, it's about them as well. And think about how you can improve those relationships to foster a culture of intentional discipleship. And with that, I want to thank you for listening to the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast. Next week, we will be expanding on this topic of creating pathways of discipleship for our parishes by looking at more concrete steps that you can take in your parish to make this happen. If you found this show helpful, please take a few seconds to text it to a priest or a friend in ministry that could benefit from it.
And with that, we'll see you in the vineyard.